We welcome now Dalaney Meecham, an immigration attorney. Meecham, pardon me. Dalaney, you there, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm here. Dalaney Meecham.
Meecham. Okay, got it. All right, so we wanted to get you on. You are an immigration attorney. I believe, are you located in Gulfport?
Yeah, that's correct. So, I started my firm in 2019 here in Gulfport after having practiced immigration for a little while at other firms. And so I've been doing this for about 10 years. We do exclusively immigration. For whatever reason, it's an area of law that I gravitated towards, and I enjoy what I do. But as you've been talking about, and as you know, it's kind of a hot topic politically, and that's something I kind of hadn't anticipated back then when I decided to go into this area of law. But here we are.
Yeah. So who would be your clients, Dalaney, and what sort of cases would you be involved in?
That's a great question. So what we do is we help people immigrate legally into the United States. We help people get visas to enter the United States. We help families adjust status to get green cards. We help people get other types of humanitarian type relief, such as U visas, which are visas for people who are victims of crimes, or T visas, which are visas for people who are victims of severe forms of human trafficking. And we do a lot of removal defense as well, which means that if you are charged under the Immigration and Nationality Act of having been present in the United States without authorization, or having entered at a place or a time that's not designated by the Attorney General, they can put you into removal proceedings, and we provide that defense if there is any defense.
Okay, so just to clarify for our audience, then is it accurate to say, Mr. Meecham, that you are representing those who seek to immigrate into this country legally?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, that's why people hire me, is to help them get papers to be here legally.
Okay.
So that's what I do, is I try to help people legalize themselves or come here legally.
Okay.
Which, there are not too many avenues, but there are avenues under the Immigration and Nationality Act, and so
sure.
If there is a way to do it legally, it's helpful to talk to an attorney, because it's not. The Immigration and Nationality Act is fairly complicated. It's codified. It's similar to the IRS in its complexity, or the tax code in its complexity, and so it's valuable to have an attorney if you have issues or questions about immigration. But it's a very specific area of law that I've been fortunate enough to learn pretty well and become pretty good at it. Our clients come to the Gulf Coast from all over the country. Some people drive. I do a lot of remote consultations, but we have clients from California and Oregon, Washington, all the way to the East Coast, Virginia, New York. A lot, but most of our cases are around here along the Gulf Coast. A lot of people come in from the Panhandle in Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana.
Well, how does that work? Because if they're here inside the boundaries of the country and you're providing legal advice and counsel to them, under what program are they here that's legal? Are they not? Did they not enter the country illegally, and then you're trying to help them become legal?
That's a great question. Correct. Yes, that's a great question, and that's why I mentioned previously that at the border, or anytime you enter the United States, they still have due process under the laws that we have. Mm-hmm. Generally, a person can't be deported unless an immigration judge issues a final order of deportation.
Okay.
In order to get to that point, an ICE officer generally will give you what's called a notice to appear. To put it into context that's probably understandable for someone who hasn't dealt with immigration, what that means is they give you essentially what is a ticket that outlines what the allegations that the federal government are alleging, and the charge under the Immigration and Nationality Act, primarily, under Section 212, a 6A, 212A7A, which just means that you entered the United States, or they believe you're accused of entering the United States at any place or time that was not approved, and you didn't have the proper documentation, or you didn't have the proper documentation.
I see.
So they filed this charging document in the immigration court, and they set it for a hearing date. Generally, the charging document has to have a hearing date, and there's been some issues back and forth between the Supreme Court and other federal courts that for a long time, for decades, they were issuing these notices to appear and not correctly putting the date of the hearing on those. And so a lot of cases have been dismissed because of the government's failure to adequately provide people notices of hearings. But at the end of the day, if you get a notice to appear, you have to appear in court for what is not... it would be what you would consider like an arraignment, where you contest or you admit to the charges, right? So you go before a judge. The judge says, well, look, these are the allegations that the federal government is saying. These are the charges that you've been charged with. How do you plead? In most of our cases, we admit the allegations. We concede that they're removable from the United States because, it streamlines the process. But at the end of the day, the government has the burden of proof to present evidence that the person entered unlawfully or that they are here unlawfully. So we could contest those charges and make the government prove those things, but that's just a preliminary step. Generally, then it's set for some type of trial date, depending on what type of relief the person is seeking. There's different types of relief. If you've been in the United States for 10 years, you have U.S. citizen children, you have good moral character, and you have can prove that would cause an exceptional or unusual harm to your U.S. citizen children or U.S. citizen spouse, then you can apply for a green card through the immigration court. But again, you have to meet those specific requirements for that provision under the law. So, there are benefits for some people who have been here over 10 years. And so, to your point, how are these people, having a right to have a court hearing or have a right to, any type of process or papers if they've entered unlawfully or they've been here unlawfully? Well, the code provides for that. The code provides things, like I said, after 10 years you get certain benefits, but there are also other benefits that people can get even if they entered unlawfully or without the proper documentation. And asylum is one of those areas. As long as you apply for asylum within a year of entry, you are entitled to a hearing on that. That's what the law is currently, based on our international treaties, our refugee laws, the Refugee Act of 1980, where that was codified. So if you meet the definition of a refugee, even if you're in the United States, they can grant you asylum. And that's the difference between, a refugee and an asylee. A refugee is someone who is granted entry into the United States as a refugee, and asylee is someone who is already in the United States who has proven that they meet the definition of a refugee.
I see. So you're aware that there was a series of orders the president issued last week concerning immigration, and one that seemed to me like would affect your services and your counsel is called the Protecting the United States from Foreign Terrorists and Other National Security and Safety Threats. That really is designed to make the vetting process a lot stricter for visa applicants. What do you think?
Sure. Yes. Well, there's a lot of them. Let me look. I've got a stack of federal executive orders here, and they all do something a little bit different.
Yeah.
So let me see which one we're referring to specifically.
Just at the high level, it just directs all agencies to be more thorough, is what it says in their vetting process.
Okay. Yeah. So let me look here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to catch you off guard.
Speak to that if I could.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's okay. Like I said, there was a gaggle of executive orders, and so I want to make sure that I'm talking about the right one.
I'm looking at 8.
Okay.
We're up against a break. If you can spend a couple of minutes there and hang on with us, you can research that and then provide us a response and your thoughts on that particular order. That's just the one that caught my attention. It seems to be more related to those seeking legal entry into this country.
And I got you, and I can talk about that when you want when we get back, or I can delve into it now if we have time.
No, we don't have time now, but if you can hang on, we'll catch you on the other side of the break. We'll be right back with Dalaney Meecham. He is an immigration attorney. Stay with studio. Dalaney Meecham, immigration attorney, based in Gulfport, Mississippi, is our guest. All right, so what do you think there, Mr. Meecham, about that particular executive order signed by President Trump last week that essentially instructs agencies involved in the immigration process to be, the way I interpreted it, more thorough in their vetting of those applying for visas into this country?
Yeah, no. So I think there's nothing wrong with being thorough in vetting people who are, trying to enter. We obviously one of the functions of the Department of Homeland Security is to prevent people who are, have bad intent, will towards the United States from entering the United States to cause harm. But at the end of the day, the process, if you talk to anyone who's been through this process, the process is already a very slow and tedious process because it is government bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is big government bureaucracy at its finest, much like I mentioned before, the IRS. And so, increasing the burden on, the immigration officials or whoever else to do potential vetting or other processes. While it's important, I don't know that it's something that was broken. I don't know that it was something that needed to be fixed necessarily to this extent. And I think that it possibly will affect a lot of people who are trying to immigrate legally by slowing down the processes. And let me give you an example of that. Let's say that you have someone who is married to a United States citizen, and you had entered the United States without any type of authorization, but you want to get a green card through United States citizen. You have to do generally, unless you can get, if you were either paroled or admitted with a visa, you have to go back to your home country to do that process through the consulate. But in order to be able to return without some type of bar, you have to get a waiver of that bar, meaning you have to be forgiven of that bar. Generally, a person who leaves the United States and tries to re-enter lawfully after having been here for more than a year will have to wait for 10 years outside the United States. That's waivable for spouses of U.S. citizens. But the ironic thing is that if you submit an application for a waiver of unlawful presence so that you can travel to get a green card because you're married to a United States citizen, the processing time for that is almost 4 years. And you're allowed to remain in the United States according to our laws while that is being processed, but you also don't have any type of status while you're waiting. So, what my concern about some of these things is that we have been pretty successful at detecting and, up to this point, stopping terrorists and other, potential threats at the border. Mm-hmm. But increasing our putting additional regulations that will bog down the system is going to make it a little bit more painful and a little bit longer for the people who are trying to enter lawfully. And obviously what we want is lawful immigration into the United States. Yeah. But I agree. I mean, some of the things that we want to achieve with our immigration policies at the border are not bad. I mean, obviously vetting and preventing terrorism and things like that are good. I don't necessarily know, because a lot of this is vague. It's executive orders. The implementation of an executive order is far different from just saying that this is what we're going to do. Actually doing it is the challenge. I think that's going to be the challenge with a lot of these executive orders.
Do you think this order that essentially cancels the birthright citizenship is going to stick? Do you expect a legal challenge to that, and that might make its way to the Supreme Court? It's been challenged, but do you think this is headed to the Supreme Court eventually?
Well, absolutely. Well, I mean, unless the Supreme Court refuses to take it up, it's going to the Supreme Court. But, I mean, you tell me what you think. I'm going to read to you the Constitution of the United States. You tell me what you think. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States.
Yeah, I mean,
that's from the Constitution.
Going just straight from that text there, it would appear that anybody born here would automatically be a citizen. It does feel like that it's been abused somewhat. Now, I know that's a separate matter than what the Constitution presently says. Even Senator Lindsey Graham has said. I noticed him this morning say that he thinks that there's a problem with that in the Constitution. He says he's offered an amendment to actually change the Constitution along those lines. He also indicated he believes the Supreme Court will uphold the order. I was a little surprised by that.
If Congress and the states ratify a change to the Constitution, then yeah, of course the Supreme Court is going to uphold it.
Yeah.
What I don't believe the Supreme, and I could be wrong, but what I don't believe the Supreme Court will uphold is an executive order that runs contrary to what the Constitution says.
Yeah.
I don't think that a president or anyone can say, we're going to modify the Constitution by executive order. I think that has a snowball's chance of making it through the litigation process. But if Congress and the states choose to,
ratify,
amend the 14th Amendment, then they can do that.
Sure. And that's not what Graham was saying. He said he's offered that in the past. It's not since the new president was sworn in. But I just caught him in an interview saying that he thinks the Supreme Court will actually uphold the order. And this may get into some legal technicalities that are above my head, honestly. But it sounds like that's what that Trump and his team are relying on.
That's and maybe they have good feelings about the appointees that Trump has put on the Supreme Court to see things the way he sees them. And traditionally, we've experienced that they do tend to see things the way he sees them. And so, I can't speak for how the Supreme Court would rule on any potential cases, but I can tell you, if you have a strict reading of the Constitution, if you're an originalist, or if you believe in following the intent of the framers and the writers of the Constitution, I believe if that's the legal framework that you will use to analyze whether an executive order can indeed make a person born in the United States not a U.S. citizen, then I don't see how they can get around that with an executive order.
Well, I want to be clear. I don't favor the use of executive orders to conflict with the Constitution or any law in that respect. It just seems like, it feels like, and this kind of bothers me, is that regardless of party, that presidents and administrations have seen fit just to implement their agenda through executive order and just kind of hope it stands the test of the courts.
Right, and that's the trend. That's the way it's been going with multiple administrations now. I practiced under Obama, I practiced under Trump the first time, I practiced under Biden. So this is the fourth presidency when that I'm under practicing immigration laws. Yeah. And at the end of the day, Congress has not changed the Immigration and Nationality Act. So all of these presidents have had to work within the framework of what's been approved by the Congress. And a lot of these things, I think that's why these are Band-Aids. They're not real fixes. They're just a different way of applying the same law, ultimately, I don't know how much of a difference it's going to make, other than it is definitely caused fear and concern in communities. We've got, I don't know, you can check these numbers because I don't have the sources, but I heard recently or read recently that there's 4.4 million families that have at least, have an undocumented immigrant living in their family. 11 million people. Look, President Trump wants to do with his immigration policies and these executive orders is something that is really something that Congress should be doing, but Congress is not doing it. Yeah. So it's really hard to enforce these laws without changing them because, Biden implemented procedures such as the CBP-1 app, which was that Trump administration
turned it off.
Disbanded. The CBP-1 app was just a way of, helping people organize whether they can apply for asylum or not and do it in an orderly manner. But I believe that we're going to replace the Remain in Mexico policies. But I don't know with Claudia, the new president of Mexico, Sheinbaum, if she's going to be willing to help or engage with that. But obviously, the United States, we saw with Colombia over the weekend that the United States has a lot of hegemonic power, a lot of economic power to kind of help these other countries get on board with what his policy goals are. And so maybe we will or maybe we won't see the Remain in Mexico policy return. But from what I've heard, some of the the administration in Mexico doesn't seem to be too willing to help with that. But then again, like I said, we saw what happened in Colombia.
We got to go.
But at the end of the day, I think what we need to...
Go ahead. Finish your thought. Got about 30 seconds.
I was just going to say, at the end of the day, I think that it's important to remember, as we're rounding up a lot of people and putting them in detention centers, that these immigration laws are civil. I mean, there's a lot of conversation about, criminals, et cetera, but the Immigration and Nationality Act and the immigration courts, they are civil courts and they're tried civilly, and this is not a crime that they're being charged with in immigration court.
Dalaney, and to your point, I'll just make this comment before we go here, is that the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, literally just issued a statement on social media saying we got to codify these orders that deal with immigration to make sure they stick. Appreciate you joining us, Dalaney. Dalaney Meecham,